welcome to The Independent Ink with Mr. Fish. I'm Mr. Fish. What follows is a conversation I recently had with cartoonist pals of mine, Patrick Chappatte and Ann Telnaes. They both recently collaborated on a book called Censorship in America that focuses largely on the Trump administration as a metaphor for villainy and despotism. And a lot of the book involves a dialogue and a conversation that they've been having recently over the future of satire and free speech internationally. So here it is, my conversation with Patrick and Ann. Dig it. All right. Okay, so here we are with my dear friend Ann and my dear friend Patrick. We're going to have a wonderful conversation about art and particularly a book that they just collaborated on, which the English translation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, is Censorship in America. Is that what it translates as?
Yeah, that's an easy one. And
Yeah.
that's the French.
Oh, look at there it is. Yeah,
Censure en Amérique. It's quite a book. It's a big,
it is.
beautiful book. Very heavy.
Yeah, hardback. It's hard to get a cartoon book published in hardback form, so that's well done, my friend. Okay, so what I'd like to start with is a question that I think we've all gotten as cartoonists, and it's sort of an exhaustingly simple question. And the question, of course, is I want to hear from each one of you on how and why you became a cartoonist. But I want it to be slightly different than what usually you would answer. I want to find out if it was the art that attracted you or the commentary that attracted you. Like, did you want to have a voice that was problematic, or did you want to, push the envelope with art? What was it that got you into this profession? We'll start with Anne.
Definitely the art, because I wasn't interested in politics to begin with. I was training to become a character animator, and during those days, the news magazines like Newsweek used to publish a weekly roundup of editorial cartoons. That had like Oliphant, McNally, Lukovich, and so on.
Mm.
And I loved looking at the art because a lot of it was really well drawn. And since I came from an art background, I was always looking to get inspired by people who could draw correctly. so, definitely the art. I was not interested in politics or making a commentary through my art until later on, when I had a couple of things happen in my background. Um, I just wasn't reading the news. I hate to say that, but I wasn't in my 20s. I was living in LA. I was interested in animation and entertainment and stuff. So yeah, then later on I realized, what a powerful tool it was to be able to use what I did best, which was draw, and have a point of view and say something. Because believe me, otherwise I wouldn't have spoken out. I'm not a writer. I don't do well speaking. So, this was the reason that I decided to go
I-
into editorial.
And just piggybacking on what you were saying, also, was there an element of being a woman entering into the field of editorial cartooning and being given the opportunity just to have a platform for your opinion, because you were probably not looking at a great deal of the women's perspective inside this profession.
How about none? Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of it, but at the time, I mean, it's still not, it's very few women. There are very few women in the business, but at the time there really wasn't any. No, and that was actually the ultimate reason why I decided to send out my editorial cartoons, a portfolio of cartoons about women's issues, because I had watched the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearings, the Supreme Court nomination hearings, where a woman accused, still seated on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, of sexual harassment when they both worked for a government agency. And since I was a young woman at the time and I had dealt with sexual harassment, of my own in the workspace, um, I really got my dander up and I decided that I wanted to do some commentary. So that's when I did my first collection of editorial cartoons, which is about women, sexism, and working in the industry.
Perfect. And I'm so glad that that has all been solved. That there's nobody in positions of power who we can accuse of sexual harassment of any sort. So
Oh, I know. They took care of that. Both the Democrats and the Republicans on that Senate committee, they all were like, well, wait a minute. We passed laws. This couldn't possibly happen. I'm like, really? Are you honestly saying that? And they did. And I mean, we all know that Joe Biden was head of this when
yeah,
he was a senator. So,
yeah,
it's not just conservatives. It's the whole system.
yeah. It's powerful people. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so, what about you, Patrick? How did you fall into this line of work?
Uh, well, to perfectly complement what Anne just said, because we are very complementary, the two of us. Um, I came to this with an interest in politics, and but of course, I was also, in every class, in every school, there is the little guy or the little girl who draws all the time, and I was that little boy. But I also was got an early interest in politics. My father was a subscriber to both a local newspaper and to Newsweek International. So I wanted to impress my father, of course,
Mm,
like all the little boys do. And I sent my so I was pretty good at doing comics. I thought I might might have an interest in drawing comics, but then I sent cartoons to a local newspaper and they published it. And I was hooked. You
yeah.
know, it's a drug to see your stuff published in a newspaper. And then I
Right.
got very popular at school. You can imagine that. So I was planning to go to college and I never did because when I was done with high school, the local newspaper for which I was sending cartoons asked me if I wanted to do an internship as a journalist, which
Yeah.
I did for 2 years. Then you get a press card. And then during that internship, the position of editorial cartoonist liberated itself, which never happens. Those guys like us, they die on the drawing board. You know, they don't quit. Well, Anne did, but we're going to talk about that. And and so I said yes, I would be interested to do that. And I was 21, and I've never stopped since. And I'm not going to tell you my age, but yeah, it's been a long time.
I think we're all in our mid 30s.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you make an interesting point because I do remember the first time I had a cartoon printed in a newspaper, and it was thrilling to see your something on it's sort of the physical paper. And there's only one publication that still publishes my stuff in a newspaper, and it's the Capitol Hill Citizen, Ralph Nader's paper out of D.C.
Mm,
And I just got this month's for I haven't even opened the envelope, but I can't wait to go through and just to see it on paper. And I think that that's what's lost for younger people who are trying to figure out how to
yeah.
get into this business. Because you can quote unquote publish anything you want online.
Yeah. It's not the
Totally.
same kick to post something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No. And so to piggyback on what we were just talking about too is just really quick. Is there other forms of art that either one of you partake in? Like, do you do other kinds of visual renderings that aren't done in service of editorial commentary? Do you just draw to draw? Do you paint to paint?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah,
I
let's
would
see.
love to have some time. Unfortunately, because of events this year, my wonderful easel that I set up before all the events started is still standing there collecting dust.
Right.
But yeah, no, I still, years ago during COVID, I had an idea for an animated short because I still would like to get back into that. That wasn't specifically political commentary. I mean, I think everything I do is social commentary. If you're going to put it under that umbrella.
Right.
Um, but it's kind of difficult right now to find time. I'm doing a lot of speaking
Yeah.
and a lot of presentations, so I'm really hoping to free up some because I think it's important. I kind of want to branch out a little bit. But we're in a time where, especially in this country, as you know,
Yeah.
that it's kind of it's a time where we have to speak up, and I don't feel right about just kind of stepping back and
Right.
not doing local commentary.
Yeah, well, I do hope that you are able to step back on occasion and take in other people's, artistic wanderings and,
Mm.
and have it satiate something inside of you. Because I feel I constantly have to heal myself from what you're talking about. What we're all doing is we're reacting to a hierarchy that is drawing all the parameters for the conversation, and it's a very ugly conversation. So you, like me, we probably feel the same thing of just like we're almost against the ropes constantly, having to push back against bullshit and anger and real ugliness. So yeah, I mean, I don't imagine you're just like, I'm going to paint myself a pretty pony today. But
Mm.
those things exist, and I do. This is one thing I talk to a lot of people about. We don't want to ever, and I'm not saying you're minimizing um, that kind of art by any stretch. I know that you can't do it, but it's really important to find these spaces where we can remind each other that we're human beings, that and we're vulnerable and we need protection. So we can pull out the artistic commentary away from just being intellectualized and also being spoken from the heart. That's why I wanted to ask that question about, how do you heal yourself from this kind of work, which is barbaric in so many ways and infuriating. So, Patrick, do you do any? I wanted you to, when you stepped away, I was hoping you were getting a guitar and we were going to.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not a painter. I'm not a wannabe artist, but I was able to reconcile my first love for comics with the news because some 25 years ago, especially with the Le Temps newspaper in Geneva, which was a pioneer in that, we developed graphic journalism in the media. And I've done that for many outlets. The International Herald Tribune, at some point, the New York Times opened itself to the genre. There's still a series you can find on the New York Times website on death row. It was the first time they developed that. It's a very nice one. It's nytimes.com/death row.
Okay.
And so that's comics journalism is a way for me to get deeper into the issues. Editorial cartooning sometimes is a lazy art because you get your topic every day and you get your satisfaction every end of the day. And sometimes it's a bit simple. It's binary. It's black and white. So it's always interesting to go to the places and to see the place and talk to people and get a perspective as a journalist on things and then report as a cartoonist. And I just did that recently for the time. First, I had a book a few years ago about COVID. Uh, the first wave of COVID. That book
Mhm.
came out October 2020, so it was quick. And recently, I've spent almost a month in the U.S. reporting on those who resist, and I can't resist showing you what Le Temps did because it's nice to see how they support the genre. That's the front page.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, and then you have really full pages
Oh, man.
of the newspaper, and that's 5 pages of reporting on people who resist in
It,
the age of Trump. So that's my. If I had a second life, I would do only that. But it's
yeah,
a lot of work.
it is a
It's
lot of work. And what's beautiful about that, and I mean, you probably heard me groan when you held up just the proof of what that can look like in a newspaper. There's nothing like that going on here in the States,
I
right?
No.
know.
No, I mean, and that's the thing that makes me crazy because anybody who looks at the history of journalism in the United States, particularly the alternative press from the 1960s into the early 70s, there were newspapers that would do that. And you can tell that it's a form of reporting that uh, it's not absent from the American scene because it's antiquated. I always argue that
No,
it's
no, it's not.
so effective.
Yeah.
I've always felt that's the strength of the language that we use, is that it looks like real life, and you can show what real faces look like and what real trauma looks like. And you involve a population in a way that is different from being othered through just text. So, amen that that's still happening somewhere, even though it's outside of the United States, which would
No, but
really,
Dwayne, to be fair, there's more and more. There's been over the last 25 years. There's been a lot of development in the field of graphic journalism, and online you'll find many stories, and even I mentioned the New York Times again / Death Row. Check it out. But then they published after that. They did publish different stories. One of them got the Pulitzer. And the same guys who got the Pulitzer, Halpern and Sloan is their
Mm.
name. They just came up with another story that you can find on the New York Times opinion website. I just forgot the topic right now. It's about immigration, I guess, and
oh,
maybe
of course.
ICE. But no, I mean it's still going on.
What's
It's rare to see it in print, but online
yeah.
there's a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are discovering somebody like Joe Sacco for that reason, that they can get
Oh
access
yeah,
to
of
it.
course.
But
He's
you
a
mentioned,
star in Europe.
yeah, yeah, and he should be a star here. I think he eats one can of soup a day just to survive. He's not being very, celebrated like he should be. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but
But Dwayne, that's an overall problem in this country. I mean, I've seen it throughout the years of, traveling to Europe and participating with Patrick in various cartoon festivals. They just appreciate their visual commentators,
yeah,
cartoonists, whatever, much more than what we do in this country, as well. I mean, the book that we're talking about, the one that was published in France,
hmm
you know, that wouldn't be published here. That size for editorial cartooning, it just isn't.
right,
And to further the point, we're having a hell of a time trying to get an English publisher. And I don't think it's just because they're loath to do cartoon books. Because this isn't just a cartoon book. This is Patrick and I discussing what's going on right now in the United States and the threats to our democracy and the threats to the free press. And I think it's actually also indicative of what's going on with, the administration, who is trying to silence its critics. We are one of them. We are part of satire. And that is the problem I think that we are having with getting a US publisher. So, it all ties in. In terms of, Patrick showing that front page, of his journalism through cartoons, again, that is, our society, our media, our journalism world that doesn't see the value in us. And I talk about this a lot when I travel, that,
Mm,
editorial cartooning, as we all know, is part of the journalism field.
mm.
But try to get an editor to understand that, that's
right.
tough sometimes. So,
Oh,
That's very true. And I remember from my first travels to the United States before I lived there for a while, but my very first travels when I was a young cartoonist, political cartoonist, having a hard time getting people to understand when I mentioned editorial cartoons for the newspapers. They would say, "Oh yeah, the comics, the comic page." The status is different in Europe. Let's say in France, it's very specific.
yeah,
Germany is different. I've been working for 7.5 years for the Spiegel. Um, it was hard to understand the status and their understanding of what political cartooning should be. But in France, with a history, very rich history dating back to the 19th century, you know, cartoonists went to jail to have the right to caricature the king. Louis
yep,
Philippe, you have the very famous story of the peer,
yep,
the king being represented in the form of a peer, and Philippon getting to trial with Daumier and getting to jail, and then they were coming out and started drawing again, and they
yep,
gained that freedom and that respect.
yeah,
So the fight for freedom of cartooning went along with the fight for freedom of the press, at least in France. Very big tradition in the UK, I guess, as well, and in other parts of Europe. But that's true. They take political cartooning very seriously, and that's very nice to see. So we're still looking for that US publisher. We found a publisher in Germany for that.
Mm.
Censure in America, it will be, but we're still looking for the US publisher.
Well, I think that one of the things that I think is problematic for this kind of work inside of America is when it comes to the dissemination of information. Uh, I think that the American model considers viewers of this kind of work customers more than potential participants in like a political movement or just a cultural movement that would demand, you know, justice and equal rights and all of those things. So when marketers start to decide what is viable as far as publications go, we're completely screwed, because if you're looking at the commodification of all ideas, all of a sudden the first thing that goes from somebody who's a satirist or somebody who's producing this kind of work is you can't say, fuck the corporate model. Capitalism is dangerous. It's very hard to do that when you're asking for permission from these just mega corporations who are going to, publish your work and disseminate it and stand behind it, because they're just going to get in trouble in their minds because they're looking at the customer base. Is this a
Well,
good epic model? And it's ridiculous.
bottom line, there is a market for that. The market is half of America.
100%.
and
I know.
and there is not only a market, there's a lot of thirst and interest for a conversation about the state of the media and of the press and of democracy in the US. It's and it is, as Anne said, it is a dialogue in words and cartoons that we're
Yeah.
having. It's not just a collection of cartoons. And that dialogue, I think, is of interest for half, at least half. I mean, there's a big audience for that. But
Mhm.
as you say, there might be different worries about publishing such a book, about liability, about, you know, this government has been intimidating the media big time, going after the media, suing the New York Times for what was that, $16 billion. Um, right now, Reporter Without Borders is ranking the US 57 this year. That's behind Sierra Leone, and that's just before Gambia. So the state of the media, of the publishing industry is dire in the US. That's a fact.
Well, this is where Anne can speak from personal experience. Just give. I'm sure many people know this story or a version of this story, but give the encapsulation of what happened with you in the Washington Post.
Oh, yeah, it seems like a long time ago, but it was actually just last January, not even a year yet. Um, I had been working for the Washington Post since 2008, so it was quite a while. And, I've been through a couple of editors. And of course, like most editorial cartoonists, I am edited. There's certain things that you have to deal with. But overall, I have never, ever been told what not to draw in terms of subject matter. So, as I normally did when I was submitting a rough for approval to go to final, I chose the topic, but it had to go through and it had to go to the editorial page editor. So, this was in December. Now, you have to understand the context of that time. A couple of months before that, before the election, the Washington Post did not endorse a presidential candidate. That was different. They had done that for many, many, many years. The opinion section had already drafted up an endorsement of Kamala Harris, and Bezos nixed it. I was in on those meetings with the opinion people when they explained, the editorial page editor explained the decision or tried to, and people were angry, and readers were angry because they were also expecting that. So that had happened in early late October, I believe. Anyway, so we went through the election. Trump won again. I was not incredibly happy to have to go through another administration of Trump because I'd already drawn him for 4 years. And frankly, it was exhausting. But I was determined, as most editorial cartoonists would be. They'd be like, okay, now I'm going to do my best work ever, and I'm going to hold these people to account.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I decided I was going to quit at any time soon. But as I said, I was submitting a rough that I honestly didn't think twice was going to cause a problem. And the way that it works at the Post is every cartoonist that works there has a editor they work directly with, who takes the rough to the editorial page editor, who makes the final decision. That's who makes the decision what to publish. And I was told through the channels no, but with no reason. So when I pressed it more, I found out some very unconvincing rationale for not publishing it, because I had read the stories about the cartoon was about tech titans and billionaires going down to Mar-a-Lago to get in Trump's good graces now that he had won, which was very different from before,
Right.
from his first term. And I had read these stories. They had been in the Washington Post, these stories.
Yeah.
So I decided to just do a cartoon about it. It's not that controversial a type cartoon if you've seen it. They're all on bended knee in front of a Trump temple. It's almost like I was sort of just reporting the news. So anyway, I was very surprised. And I did have a conversation on the phone with my editor about it. As I said, I found his rationale completely unconvincing. And I decided pretty much then and there I had to quit. And the way that I describe it in other situations, especially to journalism students, is you just know what your line is. It's not like I decided before that if this was going to happen, I was going to quit. But the opportunity came up and I knew I had to quit. So
Yeah.
that's what I decided on the 3rd of January.
Yeah. Famously so now. I mean, it's not only was it the right thing for you to do, but it was a rare demonstration of integrity that really showed, not only your fans, but people who just, there were people who didn't even follow you or know necessarily who you were, but to have that story front page, because a lot of people picked it up. And to hear that there is you can still be a hero. You can still be a hero by standing up against bullshit. Because to your point, you were not inventing anything. That's I feel like often, and Patrick, I don't know if this has been in your experience too, but I feel like most the most times I've gotten in trouble for the work that I've done is when it's just basically the blunt truth told in the most stark way. It's not an invention, it's not, yes, we use metaphor when we create our pieces, but it seems the closer you cut to the bone when it's just like, oh, I'm just actually being more of a journalist than a creative, and I'm telling the truth about something.
Mm.
That's when it seems like the hands go up and just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Now, this person should not have a megaphone of any sort, because the truth is actually more dangerous than the spin on the truth that a humorist would otherwise do.
And especially so in these very blurry times where you don't, the truth is being blurred. Information is you, hard to trust. Words mean nothing. I mean, trolling is everywhere.
Yeah.
So a cartoon, a simple cartoon, which has the capacity to just show things as they are, that's very powerful. And that's
Yeah.
what Anne was accomplishing with this cartoon. Just
Yeah.
cutting through the noise, showing things,
Yeah.
not a single word. And that's why your act, Anne, was so powerful. And it was an act of principle and courage. And in contrast, that great newspaper, that once great newspaper, was trampling its principles and showing no courage. So that was big. And we invited Anne through the Freedom Cartoonist Foundation, which I chair in Geneva, and she's a member of the advisory board. And we've been fighting through the AAEC, the Association of American Cartoonists, of which she was the chair, and now with the Foundation for Freedom of Speech. And we invited her to Geneva and to a packed audience. The theater filled up in 2 hours, and we had to open another one. And that's where we started our conversation for the book. It's in
Nice.
Geneva back in June. We
Great.
started recording the same kind of conversation we're having now about those issues, and it became that beautiful book.
Yeah, and so we're going to be looking at that book in a second. I'm going to share my screen and we can look at that stuff. And yeah, I just love hearing about that, about packing the audience, because it is, I feel like more and more it's so hard to find a space to have these kinds of conversations. And to Anne's point earlier, people are super hungry for that. It is something that people just are leaning into this wind, trying to, what can we do? Because we're not, we are intelligent people. We lead with our hearts and our heads. Where can we have these conversations, these difficult conversations? Where can we have debate? Uh, and this to me demonstrates the complete poverty of culture, particularly in the United States, where before artists were able to sort of have these kinds of conversations in theater, in film, and all of these different ways that now are just they're just not there. And I do think people are really, really hungry for it. So let's,
I think that's a really, before you go on, just I think that's a really good point. I do think there is a hunger for that in the United States now. We can see that with the No Kings protests.
yeah,
And I just think that we haven't tapped into that. I think that media hasn't really tapped into that yet.
right,
They're still hesitant because of all the pushback from the administration about going after them, but there is a need for that. And Patrick was right. I mean, the difference between me speaking in the United States and when I speak overseas is vastly different.
yeah.
I definitely always seem to have a packed house. In the United States, not so much, you know?
Yeah, and there's a history for that. It's not even just cartoonists. I remember Bill Hicks. If anybody knows the great Bill Hicks, who was a stand-up comedian from the '80s and into the early '90s, he famously could not get gigs in the United States, and he would
Hmm.
go over. He'd play the Palladium Theater in England, and packed, packed houses. Uh, and in fact, years ago, I was interviewed by a Croatian newspaper who apparently I'm big in Croatia. Who knew? Uh, the questions that they were asking me were about all of my heroes in the States. It was Bill Hicks, Lenny Bruce, all of these people who got in trouble for speaking truth to power. They know who they are, and in the States, people
But
know.
Dwayne,
What's that?
yeah, I can see the Croatian side of your humor. I can see that.
Thank you.
But since you mentioned theater, just want to mention another development, another venue to advocate about those issues in a way that is live and on stage is what I've been doing since last year. It's touring a show,
Yeah.
and this is it.
Oh, there
And
you are.
it's going to be 45 shows, and it was all packed. It was all full house each time. So we, I was amazed by that because that was an experiment for me, and I was not sure we would reach an audience. But again, it speaks to the interest and thirst and hunger for those issues in these days. So again, makes no sense that there is that interest in the US. It's huge,
Yeah.
especially in these times. It's just that the publishers are not there yet, but they should be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Okay, so here is the cover of the book that we've been talking about, and why we're here to sing its praises. As you can see, it is not in the English language yet, but we are working on that to try to make that happen, because it's a really, really important book that everybody should know about. So, to what Patrick was talking about the dialogue aspect of it, talk about this. I have just a couple examples of your work appearing on the same page and it being, a visual conversation. But talk about this for a second.
Yeah, well, that's the dialogue we were mentioning, dialogue in words, and here dialogue in cartoons. So that's a whole chapter of the book is about Trump the mobster, right? And Anne speaks very eloquently, and she draws even more eloquently about Trump as the mob guy, uh, and um, and that's where you have the dialogue between our two cartoons. Mine is saying, "You need to help me with the exact mobster language. Nice shop you got there. Would be a shame if anything happens to it, right?"
Right.
And he's speaking there to the European Union, and that's of course relating to his the way he deals with trade, which is threats mostly, and imposing his deals. So that gives you a sense of the kind of dialogue we are establishing through our different styles. And I'm very glad that French audiences and audiences all across, Belgium, Switzerland, Quebec as well, they will get to know Anne's cartoons because the feedback is amazing. I mean, they just love your cartoons, and
Yeah. And I
I'm
would
sure
guess.
yours have something to do with it, Patrick.
Yeah. Well, I love the thing too. When it comes to cartooning, this is something I always love. And just looking at Anne's mobster, the Don there, just these tiny little things. Like I love the fact that he's holding brass knuckles with those tiny, tiny, tiny hands that
That
are,
was difficult.
yeah.
As soon as you guys can sympathize with this, I was like, how do I get those little tiny fingers in those, because they're supposed to actually go into the
I know,
I'll
but
forget to do
that's the
that.
frustration. That's what I love about it. Like the tiny detail for me with that is that in a way it's like an empty threat. Like he's incapable. He's actually powerless to really be a threat unless we enable him to be that threatening because he can't even get
yeah.
his hands into the brass
Well,
knuckles.
that's deeper than I was thinking. I was just thinking, I just like the difference in his hands and how big
Well, I
the
think see, and I would argue that I was going to say, it's a subconscious thing. But I think that when it comes to drawing things that are humorous and so forth, the disconnect between reality and sort of the comical interpretation can produce an insight that is just completely unintentional, from your end, but it's definitely there.
or a happy accident.
Yes, we'll call it that. And so here's another one. So Anne, why don't you talk about this one?
Okay, but Patrick will have to translate since I don't speak French. What does yours say, Patrick?
Good dog. Now bring me the journalists.
Ah, good. Yes. So again, this is the same thing that we were talking about before is Trump's. We had discussed in the interviews about Trump's history of attacking the press. He did it all the way back in his first term. And of course, the common thing that he says, and I always like to use his actual words because they're powerful in themselves without
Yep.
having to expand on them, is he says the press is the quote enemy of the people, which is really a dangerous thing to say in a democracy because a free press is essential for a democracy. So he's in effect saying that he wants to, you know, he wants to destroy our democracy, which he's doing quite well now.
Yeah. And we've already talked about this a little bit, but the power of cartooning too is that it has this ability to encapsulate things in a very, very quick and easy way to understand. And especially when you're using the verbiage and the specifics from the person that you're targeting, this challenges somebody who said, no, this is not what it's about. Then you can say, this is what he said. This is in fact what it's precisely about. And that's what I've always loved about cartooning. It allows people to have conversations on a human level rather than, you're too stupid to get into a full blown conversation about how politics really work. It's like, no, this is about human behavior. And when it comes to politics, it's about human misbehavior. So let's really just get down to the nitty gritty and have a real conversation. Cartooning always enables that. And I love it.
And the irony of, just to mention, of this is that the whole book is actually ready to be printed in English because we had our conversation in English, then it had to be translated to French. And that cartoon on the left was in the Boston Globe. So it's the original cartoon is in English, actually.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll be shocked if you guys don't get this thing published by the end of this podcast.
Well, stay tuned.
Wow.
Stay tuned, everybody.
Excellent.
I got a lot of power in this industry. Not. Okay. So let's start. I've got Patrick's cartoons here. So just a nice little handful from the book that we can look at. And a lot of
Well,
these, yeah.
why don't you comment them, Dwayne? Your turn.
My turn. I was just going to say a lot of these, they don't need commentary. The whole point of this language that we're engaging in is that it's a universal language, and it doesn't need a verbal translation.
Mhm.
This is an obvious piece of commentary, and you
There's
can
also what I like is the implicit part in cartoons and the
right,
anticipation you can nourish looking at this cartoon. Once he is done cutting all the strings, you can imagine what might happen to him.
yeah,
It would
oh yeah.
be nice to see.
Yeah, you see the process and you see the inevitability, and it's important to translate that kind of reading of a cartoon to the reading of politics themselves. Because we all have to sit back, just even like when George W. Bush was saying, we're going to go over to Iraq and we're going to bring democracy because of Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. So much bullshit is in that kind of phrase, right? So if people look at the physics of political tomfoolery, and understand that there's real lives at stake here, and that the whole globe can be rendered re-rendered in a way by politics to make it worse and to be much more dangerous for all of us. We've got to be able to anticipate that, and when you do a cartoon like this, it gives people that practice. Here's another one that now you didn't offer that. I asked for you guys to give me some that you wanted to talk about, but I saw this one in there and I just thought it was just fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Again, it's about whitewashing U.S. history,
Yeah.
and the GOP talking about the benefits of slavery, giving them job skills for after the emancipation of slaves. It's beyond ludicrous. That's what's
And I
hard
did
about
when I
fire.
did this cartoon, I was in Washington. I was there over this, as I said, for my reporting. I spent almost a month, so I went to visit the museums in Washington, especially the ones that Trump want to, he wants to redraw history
Yeah.
so I went to the what is it, the African History Museum in
Yep.
Washington,
Hmm.
and after that visit, I was like, why do you want to change? I mean, it's a very good exhibition if you've
Yeah.
seen it.
Yeah.
The history of slavery. I mean, what do you want to edit into it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a history that involves Europeans as well as Americans. And then you get to see, it's very weird. You get to see the Nixon, when Nixon quit, the Nixon video. And you see Nixon saying, my family did not profit from it. From the presidency, I did not profit from the presidency, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not a crook.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, this guy kind of sound decent now.
I know. No, I
It's
know.
terrible.
It is. I mean, it's gotten so bad too that I don't know about you, Anne, but I mean, I never thought there would be a president that would be as reprehensible as George W. Bush. And now there's a part of me that is just like, oh, he's like Truman. He's so folksy. I'm
He's a
just like,
good painter. A good
yeah,
painter.
exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I remember being very frustrated, feeling like I used all my best hard hitting ideas for the George W. Bush administration, and now it's like, how can
point.
I do more? It's
Yeah,
frustrating.
who do
Yeah,
you?
You
but
can
go
you can reuse them, and
true, yeah.
we
But
forgot them.
going back to this, I mean, this is the power of an editorial cartoon, is the fact that, there's no words in it, but it's an image. People understand it right away.
Yep.
As Patrick said, we use visual metaphors, and it's just a really strong piece. So
And starts conversations. And what's necessary is to start conversations so that we can work through our differences and also the misinformation that might have us, clinging to these false narratives about our history and who we are and what we're going to be. It's really
Now,
important, these
now,
conversations.
of course, as soon as it was published, I got to see that I missed something big, and I should have drawn, white drops on the frame coming down the frame. That's a
Yeah,
that's a big mistake.
that's so great. Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that it's just like, oh, I've made a big mistake because I didn't put the
I was
drops in.
so frustrated. It came out.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no, no! The
Oops.
frame is too clean. It's just too
Yeah.
clean."
Again, like the commentary is much louder than the drop, the absence of drops. But I know
I
exactly
don't
what
know.
you're talking about. All right,
So
translate.
this was in English too originally, and it says, "No, it will never go away."
Perfect.
And I'm not sure you. And that was back in 20, I guess 2018, 2017, maybe.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed through the book. There were a number of cartoons that were from the previous administration, and they're still. It's just the fact that we're having to extend the alarm bells about this
Uh,
buffoon.
Yeah. Patrick and I, we talked about that because at first we kind of wanted just to show the most recent work we had done.
Yeah,
But then, discussing what was going on, it made perfect sense to go back into our archives and show things. I mean, that's another thing about editorial cartoonists that people don't really understand is, that we actually do sound the alarm fairly early. We did with Trump.
yeah,
I mean, I have to give my colleagues a lot of credit. They were the ones that on to Trump pretty early, where the news media in 2015 and 2016, they were treating him as entertainment value. I mean, honestly, I remember watching interviews of Trump by prominent journalists, and they were basically giggling through the entire interview because he was so funny. But
yeah.
you know what? Editorial cartoonists on the whole in the United States actually took him pretty seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a tradition of that. I remember when Obama was elected, and I continued to attack the office of the presidency. There was plenty with Obama starting from the very beginning, about very early on, he just extended the drone program and secret rendition stuff. And he even talked, if you remember, when he was campaigning, said it's not off the table for the United States to potentially attack Iran if necessary. So all of that stuff I kept up with, but man, did I get pushback, from people who just love the fact that Obama spoke more eloquently and definitely much more likable. So they were just like, would you just lay off, lay off, lay off? And only years after the fact, where it's just like, yeah, what you're attacking him on is legitimate targeting. You really need to keep up with that's what our job is. It's not. I would hope to for people to understand that we are not shills for either side of the aisle. We're there to attack power and privilege, and when it misbehaves.
yeah, well,
Yes.
uh, no
Netanyahu.
comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it's so Netanyahu there. I've never seen a more simple rendering of Netanyahu, and yet it's Netanyahu. Yes, you have the Israeli flag, but
Because of the flag. It's because
yeah,
of the
yeah, but well done.
Oh, and that's very current to the news these days.
Yeah,
On which side is the US in the Ukraine war? That's the question.
right,
No,
right.
it's not an old cartoon. I think it's 2025. But
Yeah,
it's a Trump. It's the Trump administration, of course.
yeah, yeah. And again, like this is a great example of not only when you do your cartooning work, it's not just about arguing something from from the intellectual point of view. uh, the power of a cartoon like this is just like, what does this feel like? It's not like, what am I just saying? What am I arguing
Yeah.
here? What does this feel like? And
Yeah,
that's what you
exactly.
really do with cartooning. And that's really nice.
There is an emotion in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's an emotional one as well.
Yeah, that's of course that's Trump's election a year ago.
Yeah.
It was front page of Le Temps newspaper. And that's one of the cartoons. When I drew it, I was like, did I go too far? Maybe is it too harsh? Is it too negative? I mean, it's a suicide. It's not
Yeah.
nice to look at. There's no smile in that cartoon. It's dire.
Right.
And then a few weeks after, I was like, well, I guess it was the right cartoon. I don't know.
No,
Yes, no, you
a hundred
called
percent.
it definitely. I think it's totally appropriate. Although I have to tell you, hanging something like that while I was working at the Post, that would be a tough one to get by. I don't think it would get by, not in this
It's
country.
dark. It's very dark.
It's supposed to be. That's the function of this job,
Mm. But
Oh,
that's the difference. But I think Patrick made the right call. I
yeah.
really like I think the addition of the arm out that you can
Mm.
Yeah.
see. The tension is a definite plus for that cartoon.
Yeah, because it shows for me. I mean, the power of this thing is that that liberty is not dead yet. Liberty is suffering in a really gruesome way. Uh, and again, these are the alarm bells that people need people need to have their lights turned on by something. So when you have something that has the volume that might wake certain people up, and if somebody's going to look at this and say that it's inappropriate because it's too upsetting, look at the reality that it's trying to mirror. That's actually more dangerous and more upsetting than what this cartoon is.
Mhm.
So have that conversation. Why is this? Open the
Mhm.
look at the window, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, we've all done variation on golf.
Yes.
And that's an easy one, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, it's that mousetrap that we need to see of just like, what's the follow through in this cartoon, and do we feel powerless to stop the follow through, and what is going to happen with the follow through? You want to build that tension with people where it's just like, oh, just Jesus, I need to stop this. I need to rectify this somehow. Where do I do that? How do I do that? So this is the last one that I have for you, Patrick. And
Yeah.
what I really like about it is it, in a way, it implicates the reader in the sense that Trump was elected. He won a fair election. And so I love that feeling of just like, okay, he didn't come out of nowhere. He didn't seize control of the government and the society. We allowed him to step up onto that pedestal as a
Mhm.
dictator, and I think that's a really important point to make.
And that was, again, a front page of Le Temps dating back to one of the primaries. It was not the election, it was not the main election. So
Right.
you could still read it in different ways. Would he be able to make it or
Yeah.
not? But it was like the first step. Which primary was that? The first big Trump victory, I forgot. Um, but yeah, we know what happened then
Yeah.
and how.
Yeah. Well done. Really nice. Oh, and then we move on to Anne.
I just love this cartoon. It's opening the book. It's the first cartoon of the book
Yeah.
to present Anne in one cartoon. The tiny hands, like the little animal hands, and those spots all over the flag.
Yeah.
The narcissism of everything, the character of Trump, everything is there.
And the
It's
speared
beautiful.
eagle.
The little bird.
Oh,
Yes, I do that quite often. This is actually from his first term when he went to one of the CPAC um, conferences, if you remember, when he
right.
came out and held the
Yes.
flag.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was the one. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But I badly wanted to have that cartoon in the opening of the book because it sums up the Trump presidencies, the two presidencies.
Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah. Really lovely.
Okay, so this one is very timely. I don't know if you both noticed before we got on for this Zoom, but apparently it has been overturned. Trump's Georgia case that he tried to influence the Georgia election,
Mm-hmm.
which of course is disappointing yet again.
Yeah.
One of Trump's enabler crony people did this, and this is a call that he had after he lost the 2020 election, and he was
Allegedly.
trying. Pardon me.
I said
Oh
alleged.
yeah, that's what he says. Yeah, right. Well, and again, this is a tactic that I find I use more and more with him and his supporters. Is I just reuse his words. So I
Yeah.
went back and looked at transcripts, and this is what he said on the call to the Secretary of State of Georgia about he was trying to figure out a way to flip that state over to him because he lost it. So yeah, it's the mobster comes back again. I mean, I have always felt he's a mobster. He acts like one, he talks like one. So that's how this cartoon came together. I'm not usually one for putting a lot of words in my cartoons, but
Yeah.
when you're using actual quotes, I think it's fine. This is this is where I do try to get the reader to go find more on the subject themselves. I want them to go back and read about it, not just me telling them to think a certain way. I want them to go back and read for themselves. So I think
Yeah.
this is a way of doing it.
Well, that's part of the whole point of inspiring these dialogues, and then you demonstrate a dialogue inside the book with Patrick, which is really
Yeah.
great, really key.
Oh, and then of course Pete Hegseth, who's also in the news, um, is the Secretary of War. They have changed that
Right.
because, we just want to make sure that our image to the rest of the world is so, inspiring. So, yes, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, is now going after one of Trump's critics, which is Senator Kelly,
Hmm.
who criticized, among other senators, criticized Trump for well, actually they put together a video where they told military members, because they're all former military people, these senators, saying that they don't have to follow orders if it's illegal. So of course Trump had a meltdown
Yep.
and said that, oh my God, they're treasonous. They should all be executed because they're traitors against their country. And of
Tradition.
course, he tried to change the narrative and said that they were encouraging military members to disobey legal orders, and that wasn't what they said.
Right.
So anyway, Pete Hegseth has now started an investigation into Senator Kelly for court martial. So it just shows that Trump is continuing his weaponization of certain departments. He's been losing a lot with the Justice Department, and now, of course, he's going over to the Secretary of War to do his bidding. So,
Yeah.
and as everybody knows, Hegseth is a former Fox News anchor. So that's where
Yeah.
this cartoon came from.
Amen. Yeah, and I love the colors. The color palette for this, I think, is really great. I really like it.
And then, of course, there's Kristi Noem, who is Secretary of Homeland Security.
Right.
Um, you know, ICE, of course, is a whole different subject matter. We could talk about that forever. But just the horribleness of all this and how she uses these guys and how I was making fun of the fact that she likes to dress up like whatever she's doing at the time. I mean, it's like watching a cosplay.
Yeah.
But of course, she also has adopted the MAGA female look of extensions, long hair, and a little bit of cosmetic surgery to the lips. So of course, I have to comment on that. And as a woman, I feel like I can.
Yeah. 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 Really, really great looking.
Yeah, this is from the first term. This is when the Trump sons had more of a presence in the administration. Now
Hmm.
they're kind of working behind the scenes, making sure they're padding their wallets with all their business interactions, which they're using their family name and the presidency to, um, like I said, pad their wallets. But at the time, Don Jr., his oldest, was really trying to extend his political influence. So I was just showing the um, the visual metaphor of the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This is, I think, the only cartoon I've ever done of Trump not orange.
Yeah, it's really great.
It makes sense for an orange tree for some reason to me. So
Yeah.
And look at the beauty of this drawing. And that's
Yeah.
where you can see that Anne went through, what is it, Disney school, right? That's how you learn your skills.
yeah, it's a very fine school for animation. You learn about art, frankly. It's not just animation. You learn about color and design. I
We
had
can
some
see that. I could
Yeah.
see this tree being animated. I could see it moving. It's beautiful, really
Yeah.
beautiful.
It really is.
That's a double spread. It's 2 pages. It's big in the book.
You'll be getting it in America soon.
Yes.
When
Oh,
we end with this image, Patrick was asking about, we were looking for resist cartoons, and I remembered I'd actually done one during his first
Yeah.
administration. So we ended the book with resist. With a little tiny Trump. That's another good visual metaphor for him
it's
because of the
perfect.
type of
Yeah.
person he is. Little.
Yeah. Yeah, because this emphasizes the call to action that I think a lot of cartooning does. I always see cartooning as a kind of activism mixed with a kind of it's a combination of philosophy and activism to me.
And
Uh,
Patrick really wanted to include that in the book. I mean, he really
yeah,
was very adamant that we talk about, going forward. I, of course, am so pessimistic about all this, but Patrick's like, we have to talk about what people can do. So he
right.
wanted to talk about a call to action. So that's also in our conversation, which he
Yeah,
very eloquently talks about.
a
Yeah,
call to pencils and action.
right.
Yes.
And then a couple more that I just threw in from Anne's.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Another one from the first administration. I should have probably saved it for the second one, but
yeah,
anyway, works.
it works so beautifully. It's really, really great. And then finally, the last one that I have for you, Anne, is this one.
And this one, I kind of want to talk to cartoonists and students alike. I was on the road. I didn't have all my drawing stuff with me. I had a little tiny sketchbook, and the news talked about Trump firing all the board of the Kennedy Center, which is a very important cultural place in Washington D.C., and putting in his own people because he not only wants to control the political arena, he also wants to control cultural things, all things Trump. So I just had my little tiny sketchbook. I drew it up real fast. I used Photoshop for color. And it's probably one of my, I feel, stronger cartoons I've done recently. But sometimes your environment is not perfect for your art. You just have to make do. And that's kind of like how I like to tell students about that.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And what I also really like about this is uh, sometimes with visual commentary, throwing a swastika in usually becomes the loudest part. It becomes shrill to many people. And there's something about your use of it here that it's subtle is maybe not the right word, but it's communicating exactly what you want it to communicate without
Yeah.
overpowering. It's not saying he's a fascist asshole, rah, rah, rah. There's just something else. There,
Oh, I
this,
was referring specifically to the stuff that I had been reading about Nazi Germany and how it's not just about their government. It was just about they overtook the entire society.
right.
They were trying to make sure the German people supported them overall. And that's
Right.
what's so dangerous. And that's what's so frightening to me when I start seeing things like Trump deciding, that he's going to take over the Kennedy Center, that he's going to change architecture in DC. He's
Right.
going to add an arch to himself. I think that's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah,
It
when we
really is.
don't see when we don't see the actions or the symbols as something to panic about anymore, when it starts to feel normalized, because that's sort of what this is saying to me. It's sneaking in, and people are becoming less panicked by it. Yeah, really, really
But
well.
to Dwayne's point, it's a tiny swastika, but it does the job beautifully.
Yeah,
Really, it feels very subtle,
yeah,
and
nice.
it is.
Patrick needs to run, so I really want to say thank you. I did have one more question, but if you have to run, I'll just
I
ask.
could, I could, I could spend another hour, but I have a deadline for.
Patrick is a busy man.
Gosh. Okay. Well, the only question that I had was, was there a disadvantage or an advantage to just focusing on Trump um, for a book about censorship in America?
I think I think it's very telling that Trump is the symptom of course, something much bigger. But
Right.
he's the one, and he's so it's just putting a face on a deep phenomenon that
Yeah.
is very worrisome, and it's a good way to tackle the broader issues, which is what I think we do in the book. It's not a book about Trump.
Right.
It's about, in the time of Trump, how freedom are shrinking in every field, and it's
Yep.
not about and it's not just about the U.S.
Right. And we
But
talk Yeah, we talk about other things too, Dwayne. We talk about, just the pushback during the Danish cartoon controversy from 2005. We also talk about the Charlie Hebdo tragedy, the murders of the cartoonists, and the intolerance towards cartoons. So, that like, sure, there's Trump cartoons in here, but really the interview is very interesting for people, anybody that's interested in, the the importance of freedom of speech and pushing back against intolerance on both sides. We talk about that as well. It's not just the right side that is screaming censorship. It's also on the left, and we talk about that. So it's, you have to understand. Uh, we put this book together very fast. Patrick was working 24/7 to get this book out, and but we had to take it in context what was going on at the time. I mean, there obviously you could do volumes of books about why we are where we are right now.
Right. And I think
Yeah,
that's why yeah, because I think that I just want to say that's what makes this project unique. Uh, because there is a danger, had you not included a dialogue and conversation about the things, Anne, that you were just elucidating on, then you do run the danger of making it only about Trump. And the idea of just like, if we can only just get rid of Trump, the world will be a much better place, ignoring all of all the supporting characters and all the sinew that connects him to big business and, other oligarchs and all of that stuff. So that's why this is a book that is, once it hits the States, everybody should get, because it is about the dialogue, and it is about having really deeper conversation that we're, something that probes deeper than what we're typically used to, and right now what we're allowed to have in the United States.
Oh, I'm getting a phone call from a US publisher.
Oh, yeah, I told you.
Yeah, just as you promised. So I need to take the call.
All right, you you go do that. All right, so thanks a lot for the conversation. Yes,
Thanks a lot.
yes.